Hello everyone, I am Himanshi Parmar and today I am going to discuss about something very interesting, something very important. But before that, I want to ask you one serious question, and that is, what if a copy becomes more real than the original one? What if a copy becomes more real than the original one? If a filtered photograph looks better than your real face, if a carefully edited Instagram reels looks better than your real life, and if an AI generated picture is more amazing than your real photograph or real image, what if an edited, recreated things get more importance than the real one? Think about it. So this is all about hyper reality, and welcome to the age of hyper reality. Today I am going to discuss about an age of postmodernism and contemporary age. Welcome. The very first point that we are going to discuss is historical and socio-political context of postmodernism. To understand postmodernism, it is very important to understand modernism. Before postmodernism, there was an age of modernism. In earlier 20th century, the writers were in the age of modernism, where so many changes happened. For example, industrialization, urbanization, World War I, and enormous changes in science and in society happened. At that point of time, it was become hard to believe in a traditional beliefs, and also writers and people started searching for new way to present a rapidly changing world. But at a point of time, the writers were keep asking that what is the true meaning of life, and how the world is changing, and what is the truth, and how can we discover the truth. That is the question that modernist writers were keep asking. But then came the World War II, the Holocaust, the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, then came Cold War, and then political conflict happened, then mass media and consumer capitalism and rapidly developing technology make people hard to believe that the world is moving towards the new or the better world. It was became near to impossible to believe that the world is getting better day by day. And then what happens that the sense of uncertainty emerges, and the postmodernism is rooted in that uncertainty. Postmodernism came from that sense of uncertainty. Instead of asking that how can we discover the truth, postmodernist writers start asking that what decide that what truth is, who decide, what decide that what truth is. So this is the complete different perspective that postmodernist writers or postmodernist people started thinking of. Instead of discovering truth, they started building their own truths, and this how the postmodern age began. The very second point that we are going to discuss is major characteristics. There are so many characteristics are used to define postmodernism. The very first among that is fragmentation. What is fragmentation? So that fragmentation means to not believing in a one single linear kind of storyline while traveling in a time period. The postmodernist writer writing something that travels in a different time period, they are using different perspective, they are using unreliable narrator, and somewhere and somehow the story doesn't feel like a simple linear story. It feels very difficult to understand, it makes you uncomfortable, and that is the quality, that is the characteristics of fragmentation, that is the characteristics of postmodernist writers. The second thing is they are using irony. Either they are making comedy, humor, contradiction, and using irony they indicate something or they write something but they mean something else. They are using symbols and representing something else. Either they are making irony on on a political parties, on a religion, whatever it is, but they are not directly satiring them. The third characteristic is intertextuality. What is intertextuality? So intertextuality means referring a one book in another book or referring a one text in another text. For example, Revolution 2020 written by Chetan Bhagat. He in a Revolution 2020 welcomed himself as a chief guest in the book, and he is talking about his previous book in a current book. So when a person is talking about a book that is already written in a current book, that is intertextuality. Then comes the next characteristics, and that is unreliable narrator. In postmodern age, people started using unreliable narrator. That means narrators are lying itself. Again, if you will take the example of this Revolution 2020, in that the character or the narrator itself is lying. He is saying that I am not reliable. He says that my perspective is different than the other perspective. The entire story that I am telling is from my perspective. I am telling you, it's totally up to you that you want to believe the story or not. So this is how all the characteristics are mentioned of postmodernism. Now the third point we are going to discuss is who are the famous writers in postmodern and contemporary age. So the very first name that is coming into my mind is Salman Rushdie, who wrote Midnight's Children, and in his book he discussed about racism, he discussed about the question of birth, and he discussed about the nationality and all other problems that were there in our country at that point of time. Then comes Don DeLillo is there, Thomas is there. Then we can take Arundhati Roy, and her book The Ministry of Utmost Happiness is there, in which she talks about about the LGBTQ community, then again the racism and the religion, and satiring that she is satiring politics, and the Jantar Mantar protest she is satiring. So there are so many writers were there. Derrida is there, who gave the theory of deconstruction, where he taught that how to deconstruct a book or how to see a text from a different point of view. The theory of criticism itself is there, and other writers are also there. For example, Umberto is there, Italo is there. So there are so many writers are there in postmodern age who talks about how to see a text from a different point of view, or how to see a text from different views, and how we cannot see every text traditionally, but we can see a text from a different perspective. So this is the third point that we have discussed about major works and the writers of postmodern and contemporary age. Then again we can take example of Revolution 2020 written by Chetan Bhagat. So he is also there, a contemporary writer. After all the writers that we have discussed, I still remember so many writers who are there in the postmodern age. For example, Toni Morrison, who talks about African discrimination and racism again in America. Then there is Samuel Beckett, who talks about or questions about existentialism, who wrote Waiting for Godot. Then comes Margaret Atwood, and then we can say that Vladimir and so many other writers are there. For example, Kazuo Ishiguro and other writers are also there in the age of postmodernism. So in postmodernism there are so many writers who talks about different theories, who gave different theories. For example, Derrida's deconstruction, then Samuel Beckett's existentialism, and the question about our existence. So there are so many theories are given by different postmodernist and contemporary writers. The next point is literary movements existed in the postmodernism age and the contemporary age. The very first literary movement is itself a postmodernism. What is postmodernism literary movement means? It means looking at a story or looking at a one particular meaning from a different point of view and declining to believe the fixed meanings or the traditional storytelling or the universal truths, and discovering our own truths, discovering our own meanings. The second literary movement is post-colonial literature. That means after uh, World War II, we get independence, and then the writers started writing about the colonialism and the things that were happened during colonialism, and how the politics is building, and how the religion is shaping the point of views of people, and what kind of poverty is there, what kind of imperialism is there, and so many other things. People are or writers are started writing, and people are started thinking, which about which they were not getting chance to think while colonialism, because it was banned during the colonialism. It was the voices of people were not being heard by the colonials. So after colonials left, or during the post colonial period, people started uh, shouting out their voices, and people started represented their thoughts in a form of writing. And then the third one is feminist literature. The women are also came in, and they also started writing about such kind of issues, politics, religions. They also started taking parts in all such kind of activities which were previously are defined to belong to men. So now the feminist writers are also talking about religion, talking about politics, which were something looks like a breaking the tradition. In this literary movements, we can take example of Arundhati Roy, who in her book The Ministry of Utmost Happiness talks a lot about religion, and talks a lot about LGBTQ community and the political and the Jantar Mantar protest, and so many things which were not believed to talk talk by the women at that point of time. Then there was diaspora and multicultural literature. People are leaving India for some kind of reasons, and how they feel after they leaving India. For example, they started feeling alienation in the foreign country. They started feeling, for example, you can say that separated, their mindsets were different. They are rooted in Indian values and Indian tradition, but they have to live according to the foreign rules. So that kind of conflict in their mind, and that kind of conflict between the generations, for example, the parents and the children's, the parents were born and brought up in India, so they have that culture, they're rooted into the Indian values, but the children of them are born and brought up in a foreign country. So they are raised as a foreigners, they are raised as a British children's, for example, and the conflict between the parents and children's are there. So that was also came as a theme in a books during the postmodern or the contemporary period. Then again, the very last literary movements came, that is environmental theories and climate change. Climate change nowadays becomes very important, very serious question. So people started discussing about climate change. For example, Amitav Ghosh in his book Gun Island, he started discussing about climate change and what will happen if we will not pay attention to climate change, and if we will not find the ways to fix the climate change. So all that possibilities he mentioned in his book The Gun Island. Now at the end, the only interesting fact that I want to add about postmodernist age, or I want to add about the contemporary age, is that today the situation is, the reality is not we experience, it's not just what we experience, it is about what we edit, what we upload, what we share, what we mix, what we recreate, and all other things are also there. For example, you are remixing the image, you are recreating the image and sharing on your social media, and then you take one scene from one book and you can recreate the scene into a visual. You can make a film about it, you can make a shorts about it, and that's what people started believing, that this is the truth. So the very interesting fact is, truth is what you see, the truth is what you think, and the truth is what you create or recreate, I would say. So this is how the beliefs going on during the postmodern and the contemporary age. At the end, I would say that what if the reality we think we know is partly constructed by the stories, images, languages, and technologies surrounded us, from literature to cinema, from advertising to social media, from memes to artificial intelligence. So many things are there, and the new inventions are keep coming. Okay, so that's all from my side. This is all about postmodernism and contemporary age, and I hope you understand the video. I hope you understand about age. Happy learning, wishing you a very bright future. Thank you.